My name is Theresa Marlowe, 32 years old. The autumn sky had already dimmed when I pulled into my parents' driveway, their suburban house bathed in the same golden light I'd known since childhood. Sunday dinner was supposed to be tradition, though in truth it had become an obligation, a ritual performance where we all pretended that our family wasn't fractured by favoritism and unspoken debts. I smoothed the creases in my charcoal skirt, inhaled, and stepped out of my modest sedan. Through the bay window, laughter and movement flickered like a play staged without me. I hesitated, the familiar knot forming in my stomach, then knocked twice before sliding the key into the lock. "Always announce yourself, Theresa," Mom used to say. "It's polite." Inside, the scent of roast chicken and rosemary potatoes wrapped around me, warm and suffocating all at once. Family photos lined the hallway, Dad's grin at Rachel's college graduation, my half-smile at my own, vacations where I looked more like an observer than a daughter. "Theresa, is that you?" Mom's voice floated from the dining room, buoyant. "It's me," I called back, hanging my coat on the rack. When I stepped into the room, I froze. Rachel stood in a burgundy cocktail dress, hair freshly highlighted, glowing as if the spotlight belonged solely to her. Dad poured champagne into the crystal flutes reserved for Christmas and milestone birthdays. Mom fussed with her pearl earrings, excitement radiating from her. "You're just in time," she exclaimed, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of Chanel No. 5. "Perfect timing," Dad added. We were about to toast. "To what?" I asked, though I already sensed the answer. Rachel clutched her glass, barely able to contain herself. "I found it," she blurted. "My dream house. Oakwood Heights. The luxury townhouses with rooftop gardens. They accepted our offer this morning." My forced smile stiffened. Oakwood Heights, the place where starting prices soared past $450,000. Dad wrapped an arm around her. We couldn't be prouder. "And we're helping with the down payment," Mom chimed in, patting Rachel's hand. "From the family trust fund." The flute trembled in my grip. "The family trust fund?" Mom nodded cheerfully. "Of course, for family milestones. This is Rachel's." The room tilted, my heart pounding against bone. "You mean the account I've been contributing to for 10 years? For a moment, Dad's eyes flickered. Guilt, hesitation, before hardening. "It's always been for family, Theresa. Rachel's ready. You'll understand." I couldn't breathe. My mind reached back. Age 22, fresh out of college, invited to dinner where Dad spread paperwork across this very table. "Start your future fund," he had said. Mom had smiled, encouraging me to add what I could. Month after month, $500 gone from my paycheck. Vacations skipped, secondhand furniture purchased, nights alone in a cramped apartment, all for a promise that one day it would be my foundation. And now it was Rachel's triumph. Rachel pulled out her phone, swiping through glossy photos. "Look, granite countertops, cathedral ceilings. Oh, and the master has a walk-in closet." "It's beautiful," I managed, voice strangled. "See?" Dad beamed. "Theresa's always been the responsible one. She understands." Mom's pat on my arm was dismissive. "You don't even have a boyfriend yet, dear. Rachel's at a different stage of life." Her words sliced deeper than she knew. Rachel, the golden child, recipient of a gifted car, the European vacation labeled educational, the graduate degree funded without hesitation. Meanwhile, I rode buses in the rain, patched leaky ceilings, turned down opportunities to stay close, dependable. "Excuse me," I murmured, setting down the champagne. I hurried to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, opening the banking app. The account glared back. Previous balance, nearly $60,000. Current balance, $0. Last transaction, transfer to external account. Yesterday. My stomach dropped. The air thinned. A decade of sacrifice vanished in one click, without so much as a conversation. Through the door, I heard Rachel's bubbling chatter about paint colors, Mom's delighted hums, Dad's proud rumble. I gripped the porcelain sink, knuckles white. In the mirror, a stranger stared back, the dutiful daughter, hollowed out. This isn't about money anymore, I thought. This is about value, about being seen. I drew in a breath, straightened my shoulders, and unlocked the door. The hinges creaked as I pushed it wide, louder than intended. Conversation halted mid-laugh. 3 faces turned toward me, champagne glasses frozen. "That was my money." My voice rang sharper than I expected, steady and cold. Mom's laugh fluttered nervously. It's a family fund, dear. We've always made decisions as a family. Decisions? I shot back. Was I consulted before you emptied an account I built with every spare dollar? Rachel rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. It's not like you were using it. Dad set down his glass deliberately. Calm down, Theresa. Your sister needs this house. It's for the greater good of the family. The greater good? The words burned. Show me the statements. Dad's jaw tightened. Now isn't the time. Show me the statements. Each syllable landed heavy. A silent battle passed between Mom and Dad. Finally, Dad exhaled, stood, and left the room. I could feel Rachel's glare searing into me, her champagne stem twirling like she was already rehearsing how to tell this story to her friends. Theresa, the ungrateful sister. Minutes later, Dad returned with a leather portfolio. He dropped it on the table. I seized it, flipping through page after page, my deposits neat as clockwork, no contributions from them. A lump rose in my throat. Not $1 from either of you. Dad shifted, muttering, We gave guidance, strategy. Guidance? My finger jabbed at a withdrawal line. $20,000 in August 2022? Rachel stared at her nails. Graduate school, Mom answered smoothly. And this $12,000, these smaller ones? The car, Dad admitted gruffly. Her transition, her trip. Each word twisted the knife. I closed the portfolio with a snap, my chest hollow but seething. And what about my needs? You've always been capable, Dad said, as if praising me. So independent, Mom added softly. Because I had no choice, I countered. Every time I asked, it was no. Mom's eyes glistened. That's not fair, Theresa. After all we've done. What exactly have you done? My tone was flat, no longer pleading. We raised you, Dad barked. A roof, food. The bare minimum, I interrupted. Rachel smirked. It's just money. You'll save more. It's not my fault you chose a boring career. Her cruelty sliced the final thread. I gathered my purse and the portfolio. Where are you going? Mom's voice cracked. I've lost my appetite. Dad stood, his authority looming. We expect you to be reasonable. The decision is made. Yes, I said, turning to the door. It has. Rachel's voice followed, sharp and scornful. You're ruining everything over some money. I paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. Dad's rigid jaw, Mom twisting her napkin, Rachel's exasperation. This isn't about money, I said quietly. It's about trust. The door clicked behind me, soft yet final. In my car, the portfolio sat heavy on the passenger seat. 10 years of sacrifice bound in leather. Streetlights flickered on, illuminating a road I'd never taken before. For once, the responsible daughter wasn't returning. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, an indifferent witness to my unraveling. I spread the bank statements across my coffee table, each page another reminder of the life I had sacrificed to build a future that had been handed away in an instant. 10 years of $500 deposits, my name typed neatly beside every line. It looked like evidence in a trial, only the defendants were my parents and my sister. My phone buzzed again, insistent. I didn't need to check. The caller ID had already cycled through Mom, Dad, Rachel, and back again. I let it vibrate itself into silence, but the notification light kept blinking, a stubborn reminder of their persistence. I finally tapped to listen. Sweetheart, Mom's voice cooed in the first voicemail, all syrup and steel. You're overreacting. This is Rachel's moment. She needs the house. She has a fiancé to think about. We'll talk tomorrow. The next message was Dad's, sharp and clipped. Your silence is disappointing, Theresa. The Marlowe family doesn't air dirty laundry. Stop this childish tantrum before it hurts our reputation. And then Rachel's voice, the one that used to giggle secrets with me under covers when we were little. You could at least be happy for me. It's not like you were ever going to use that money anyway. I deleted all three. Still, the ache lingered. Scrolling Instagram was masochism, but I did it anyway. Rachel had posted a glossy photo in front of the Oakwood Heights sales office, holding shiny new keys like a prize. The caption, dreams come true when you have a generous family. Hashtags tumbled after. Hashtag blessed, hashtag new home, hash family first. Dozens of comments congratulated her on her hard work and dedication. I almost laughed. Hard work? She hadn't even worked full-time until her late 20s. The cruel irony tightened my chest until my fingers itched to type a reply. I drafted one. Congrats on spending my $60,000. Hope the granite countertops appreciate the sacrifice. Deleted it. Typed another. Funny definition of family. Drain your sister's account and call it generosity. Deleted that too. At last I wrote, "Congratulations on your new home. May it bring you as much joy as my decade of savings did." My thumb hovered. Was it too bitter? Too revealing? But something inside me, raw and exhausted, refused to be silent. I hit post. The comments began to trickle almost instantly. Friends asking what I meant, relatives tagging each other, the quiet ripple of scandal beginning. My phone buzzed like a live wire. A knock startled me. It was Sarah, my college friend turned paralegal, holding a bottle of Merlot in one hand and a folder in the other. "You sounded like death on the phone," she said, striding in without waiting for an invitation. "So, I brought reinforcements." I eyed the folder warily. "What's that?" She set the wine on the counter and pulled out 2 glasses from my cupboard like she lived here. "Information. You said they emptied a joint account you've been funding for 10 years? "Yes," I whispered. "Almost 60,000, just gone." She poured the wine, dark red, pooling like blood. "Theresa, that's not just unfair. That might be illegal." The word hit me like a slap. Illegal? But their names were on it too. It was a family account. "Joint doesn't mean communal," Sarah said, sliding papers toward me. "If you can prove you were the sole contributor, it's misappropriation. Courts don't care if it's your parents or strangers. Theft is theft." I stared at the pages. Statutes, case precedents, words like fiduciary responsibility, too clinical to describe Sunday dinners and childhood bedrooms. My stomach twisted. "I can't sue my family." Sarah leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. "And you can't let them steal from you, because that's what this is, stealing." The word I hadn't let myself think settled in the room, heavy and undeniable. I thought of Rachel's smug smile, Dad's hard tone, Mom's dismissive pat. 10 years of sacrifices, bus rides in the rain, skipped vacations, meals stretched thin. And their defense? "You'll understand. You're capable. You're independent." A cold clarity seeped through me. If this had been anyone else, a bank, a boss, a stranger, I wouldn't hesitate to fight back. So why did DNA excuse betrayal? I drained the rest of my glass, staring at the neat columns of my own deposits, each one a reminder. This wasn't charity I gave them. This was trust. And trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt with apologies or lemon squares. "Who would I even talk to?" I asked finally. Sarah smiled grimly. "I know someone. Senior partner at my firm. He's seen uglier cases than this, if you're ready." I wasn't ready. Not yet. But for the first time, I wanted to be. Outside, the city street buzzed with indifferent life, headlights streaking against my window. Inside, the bank statements glared up like a verdict waiting to be read. I had a choice: remain the responsible daughter, forever forgiving, or finally claim the voice I had been trained to swallow. I gathered the pages, stacking them neatly, the way Dad always said, organization shows character. This time, the order wasn't for his approval, it was for my defense. My phone buzzed again, another call from Mom. I let it ring. "Tell me, Theresa," Sarah asked quietly, watching me. "Are you going to keep being their safety net, or are you ready to cut the ropes?" I didn't answer. Not yet. But the silence was an answer of its own. The law office smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, the kind of place where time felt slower, but decisions carried the weight of centuries. Across the gleaming conference table sat Thomas Reeves, senior partner at Westbrook and Associates. Silver hair, rimless glasses, and a gaze that sliced through pretense with quiet precision. Sarah sat beside me, her presence a lifeline. I laid the leather portfolio on the table, pushing it toward him with trembling hands. He leafed through the statements methodically. His fingers were steady, but I caught the tightening of his jaw. "Every month," he murmured, "without fail. Your contributions, no others." "Yes," I whispered. He removed his glasses, setting them down. "This is not a trust. It's a joint account. But by law, contributions determine ownership. They had no right to remove funds without your consent." The words landed heavy. No right. Not just unfair, not just unkind, unlawful. "But they're my parents," I said, voice breaking on the word. His expression softened, but his tone did not. "That makes it more troubling, not less." He outlined steps: certified letters disputing the transfer, formal notice to the bank, a demand for restitution. Each phrase sounded clinical, but underneath, I felt the ripple of something far larger, like pulling a single thread from a tapestry and watching the whole weave unravel. When we left the office, the late afternoon sun was fading, gilding the city in melancholy light. My stomach twisted. I wanted justice, but I also wanted a family. Could I have both? I didn't get time to wrestle with it. 2 nights later, Mom called. "Sunday dinner, Theresa. No excuses. We need to talk." Her tone was sugar-coated threat, but I went. The moment I stepped into Uncle Frank's dining room, I knew. It wasn't a family meal. It was an ambush. Uncle sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, disappointment radiating. Cousin William leaned forward with the cocky ease of a man still living on the fumes of old football glory. Rachel sat immaculate, nails gleaming, eyes darting between me and her phone. "You're breaking your mother's heart," Uncle Frank intoned, pointing his fork like a gavel. "She hasn't slept since those legal letters." I sipped water to keep from retorting. "Rachel has always had big dreams," William added. "You're just a teacher." The word "just" dripped contempt. I folded my napkin deliberately. I've spent my life helping children achieve theirs, including paying college application fees for 3 students out of my own pocket last year. The table fell briefly silent. Even Rachel shifted uncomfortably. But then Uncle barreled on. "Your sister needs that money for her future. A house, a wedding. She has plans." "So did I replied simply. It was the first time I'd said it aloud, not as a whisper to myself, but as a declaration. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the clink of silverware. My phone buzzed on the table. Grateful for the excuse, I excused myself to the kitchen. Unknown number. Against instinct, I answered. "Theresa?" The voice was warm, lined with desert air. "It's Meredith, your aunt." I froze. My father's sister. We hadn't spoken in years. "How did you—" "Sarah called me," she said briskly. "We've kept in touch." Of course they had. Strong women tend to find each other. "I heard what Robert and Patricia did with your savings." "It's complicated," I murmured automatically, the old reflex. "No, it's not," she cut in. "They did the same to me with Grandma's jewelry, pieces she left me in her will. Robert convinced me they had to stay in the main family line. I let it go because I thought that's what family did." My breath caught. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. They build walls of silence. Your grandfather did it to your father. He learned well." Her tone softened. "Don't let them do this to you, Theresa. Don't be the next link in a chain of theft disguised as tradition." Her words echoed louder than Uncle Frank's scolding, louder than Rachel's entitlement. A pattern stretching back decades, polished into respectability by the phrase family reputation. I looked at the drawings on my fridge, gifts from my 3rd graders. Bright suns, clumsy rainbows, stick figure families holding hands. Integrity written in crayon. They believed the lessons I taught. Could I betray them by not believing them myself? "This stops with me," I whispered into the phone. "Good girl," Aunt Meredith said, her smile audible. "Now, here's what you're going to do." She laid out steps, practical and unflinching. Legal documents to request, phrases to use, names to contact. But beneath the logistics was something more vital, the confirmation that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't dramatic. I was part of a legacy of women diminished for convenience, and I was about to break it. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation faltered under the weight of my changed expression. Uncle opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "I'm leaving," I said simply, "and I'm not backing down." Rachel scoffed, flipping her hair. "God, Theresa, you make everything about you." I met her gaze. "No, for once I'm making it about me." Her smirk faltered. I walked out, the night air sharp and freeing against my skin. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't check. For the first time in my life, I wasn't answering to them. And somewhere across the miles, my aunt, my unexpected ally, was smiling in solidarity. The email arrived just after dawn, subject line clipped and bureaucratic. Notice of account freeze, pending investigation. I read it 3 times, the words blurring with relief and dread. The bank had acknowledged my dispute. Funds in the joint account were suspended until further review. The number $59,872.43 sat like a shield in black font. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the air grow heavier, because I knew my family wouldn't take this quietly. By mid-morning, my phone vibrated with Dad's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What have you done?" His voice thundered, louder than the static on the line. "Protected what's mine," I said, surprised by the calm in my tone. "You're tearing this family apart over dollars and cents." "No," I replied. "You did that the moment you stole them." He sputtered, ranting about loyalty, reputation, sacrifice. I held the phone away, letting the storm spend itself. When he finally demanded, "Are you finished?" I answered, "Yes," then hung up. At school, I stood before my third graders, their projects on simple machines scattered across the desks. Mason's pulley system, Lily's lever, Xavier's hand-drawn gears. Their curiosity was pure, untouched by betrayal. "Remember," I told them, "integrity means doing the right thing even when it's hard." A hand shot up. "Like standing up when people are mean?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. Exactly like that. During recess, I straightened the drawings pinned to the bulletin board. One caught my eye, Jamie's picture from last month. A stick figure stood tall while smaller ones whispered behind. In careful letters, "Miss Marlowe taught me to stand up for myself." The timing was cruel, almost divine. I stared at it until my vision blurred. Children believed me capable of teaching courage. Wasn't it time I lived it? When the final bell rang, the halls emptied with laughter and stomping shoes. I lingered, tidying my desk, unwilling to face the next storm. It came anyway. "Theresa?" I turned. My mother stood in the doorway of my classroom, pearl bracelet glinting against fluorescent light. Out of place among construction paper suns and alphabet charts, she looked smaller than I remembered, yet still formidable. "We need to talk." She closed the door, lowering her voice, though no one was around. "The bank notice. You didn't have to go that far." "They emptied my account without asking," I said, stacking folders. "We're family. We handle things privately." "We could have," I countered. 10 years ago, last month, even last week, but not anymore." Her smile faltered. "Do you know what this is doing to your father? To Rachel? Her wedding plans?" I slammed the drawer shut, startling us both. For once, this isn't about Rachel's plans. Her eyes watered. "You've always been our rock. We relied on you because you were strong." "No," I said. "You relied on me because it was convenient." The silence stretched. She fiddled with her bracelet, the click of pearls filling the gap. At last she whispered, "You don't know what your father had to do after Grandpa died." My pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" She shook her head quickly. Too quickly. "Nothing. Just, you don't understand the sacrifices." Then she was gone, leaving the scent of perfume and a trail of unanswered questions. That night, my Instagram post reached a fever pitch. Cousin Lila commented, "Theresa, are you okay?" A former neighbor messaged, "I always suspected favoritism in your family." An old classmate wrote bluntly, "So Rachel stole your savings?" The whispers had grown into public ripples. Rachel responded with a story, a close-up of her engagement ring, captioned, "Haters gonna hate. Blessed to have real supporters." The irony stung. My decade of sacrifice reduced to haters. Direct messages flooded, half supportive, half condemning. "Family comes first," one relative scolded. "Don't embarrass your parents like this." Another urged me, "Take them to court. Don't let them gaslight you." I lay awake, phone buzzing like a hive, staring at the ceiling fan's slow rotations. For years, silence had been my survival. Now, silence seemed like complicity. 2 days later, Sarah dropped by with groceries and legal pads. "They're rattled," she said. "Good. That means they know they're vulnerable." I told her about Mom's cryptic remark, the half-swallowed confession. She said something about sacrifices after Grandpa died. Sarah's brow furrowed. "That could mean financial mishandling, or worse. Have you ever seen the estate documents?" "No," I admitted. "Dad kept them locked away." "Then we need to." The thought chilled me. My family wasn't just messy. They might be hiding generations of theft disguised as tradition. Late that night, as I sorted papers for class, I caught myself rehearsing how I'd asked Dad directly. But then I remembered his rage, the way his voice thundered down the line. He'd never confess, not willingly. So instead, I wrote in my journal, what else did they take that was meant for me? For Aunt Meredith? For anyone outside the Golden Circle? The words felt dangerous, like striking a match near dry grass. And yet, in the quiet of my apartment, I felt stronger. The bank had frozen the funds. My voice had reached beyond their control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the Marlowe family's reliable, silent daughter. I was something else entirely. And I wasn't finished. The walnut conference table gleamed under recessed lighting, polished to a mirror that reflected more tension than elegance. I sat beside Thomas Reeves, my attorney, who radiated the calm of a man who had spent 40 years dismantling excuses. To my left, Sarah gave a subtle nod, silent support. Across the table, my parents sat shoulder to shoulder, presenting a united front. Dad's jaw shifted back and forth, chewing on unspoken fury. Mom twisted a tissue into white shreds, her pearl bracelet clicking like a metronome of nerves. Rachel lounged with her phone angled slightly under the table, but her restless tapping betrayed her veneer of indifference. "Let's begin," Thomas said, opening a leather portfolio with deliberate care. His voice was steady, neither combative nor conciliatory, simply inevitable. Dad slammed his hand against the table. "This is ridiculous. We're family, not adversaries. Theresa, I raised you better than this." The sting was familiar, but I'd rehearsed my answer in the mirror. "Did you?" My tone was quiet, razor sharp. Mom dabbed at dry eyes. "You're tearing this family apart over money." "Money?" I leaned forward. "Or trust?" Thomas cleared his throat, sliding printed statements across the polished surface. "Mrs. and Mr. Marlowe, these records show a decade of monthly deposits, all from Theresa, not a single contribution from either of you." Rachel finally looked up, color draining. The numbers were undeniable, line after line of my name, my money. Dad's face flushed. "We manage the account. That's a contribution." "Mismanaged would be more accurate," Thomas replied evenly. "Under state law, this constitutes financial misappropriation." "We didn't need authorization," Dad snapped. "It's a family fund." "That's not what the paperwork indicates." Thomas tapped another document. "The account was established in Theresa's name, with you as co-signatories, not as a discretionary family trust." Mom leaned closer to Dad, whispering urgently. I caught only fragments: reputation, wedding, compromise. Rachel pushed her chair back abruptly, the scrape echoing in the sterile room. "You promised me that house. I've already told everyone. Jason and I picked out furniture." Her voice rose, brittle with panic. "Rachel!" Mom hissed, tone sharp for the first time. "No!" Rachel's voice cracked. "This is humiliating. What am I supposed to tell Jason? That we can't afford the house because my sister is being selfish?" The word hung in the air like a blade. I turned toward her. "Selfish?" My voice trembled, but not from fear. "I lived in an apartment with broken heating for 3 winters to save that money. I skipped vacations. I carried this family's expectations while you indulged, and now I'm selfish for asking to keep what's mine." Dad's hand clenched into a fist. Mom pressed her tissue harder, as if she could erase reality by shredding it. Thomas slid another document forward. "We've prepared a settlement agreement. Full restoration of Theresa's funds, with 5% interest compounded annually. This is generous, considering we could pursue damages." Dad's eyes narrowed. "You would sue your own parents?" "I would protect what's mine," I said. "Just like you always taught me." The silence was suffocating, broken only by the quiet whir of the air conditioning. Mom's pearls clicked. Rachel's phone buzzed with a notification she didn't check. Dad leaned forward, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Let's be reasonable. We'll split the money 3 ways. Fair for everyone." Thomas opened his mouth, but I touched his arm. This moment belonged to me. "No," I said simply. The word was heavier than any speech, falling into the room like a stone in still water. Dad's face hardened. "Is this how you repay us for everything? Your mother and I gave you every advantage." "Did you?" I placed my palms flat on the table. "You gave Rachel a car for graduation. I took the bus. You paid for her master's degree. I worked full-time while studying. You funded her trip to Europe. I haven't had a vacation in 6 years. And when I trusted you to safeguard my future, you emptied it." Mom flinched, finally meeting my eyes. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame. Thomas nudged the agreement closer. "It's in everyone's best interest to sign today." Rachel muttered under her breath, "Perfect Theresa, always getting her way." I ignored her. Dad stared at the document, pen trembling slightly in his hand. His authority, so absolute for decades, seemed to waver. "You're forcing me to open drawers that should stay shut," he muttered. A chill slid down my spine. "What drawers?" He didn't answer. Mom reached for the pen first. Her signature flowed in elegant loops, a practiced flourish. She didn't look up once. Dad followed, his writing jagged, angry. The room exhaled collectively when the papers were signed. Rachel shoved her chair back again, standing abruptly. "This is so typical. Perfect Theresa wins. I've already told everyone about the house." "That's not my problem," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Family helps family, Mom said weakly, as if repeating an old prayer. This was never about money, I said, gathering the signed agreement. It was about respect. Rachel stormed out, the door slamming like a gavel. Mom followed, casting me one last look that was part disappointment, part something softer. Dad lingered, authority hollowed by ink on paper. I hope you're satisfied, he said finally. I studied him, the man whose approval I'd chased for decades. I'm not satisfied. I'm just done being silent. He left without another word. Thomas gathered his documents, tucking them neatly into his briefcase. The bank will process the transfer within 48 hours. Would you like them to prepare a cashier's check? Yes, I said, the word tasting like liberation. When I stepped out into the late afternoon air, the sun was blinding. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest lifted, not because the money was coming back, but because I had taken back my voice. Still, Dad's muttered words echoed in my mind like a warning, drawers that should stay shut. I knew this wasn't over. The envelope from the bank arrived 2 days later, heavier than it looked. Inside, a crisp cashier's check made tangible the decade I thought had been stolen forever. $62,965.17. 10 years, distilled into a rectangle of paper. I held it like it might crumble in my hands. Relief coursed through me, but so did something unexpected. Grief. Because no matter what numbers glared back, the years I'd sacrificed weren't refundable. The skipped vacations, the rain-soaked bus rides, the lonely nights in a shoebox apartment. That time was gone. Still, the check hummed with possibility. The first thing I did was drive to Westside Elementary's administrative office. Principal Alvarez looked up in surprise as I slid an envelope across her desk. What's this? A donation, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. $5,000 for the scholarship fund. Her brows rose. Theresa. That's generous. Can I ask what prompted this? I smiled faintly. An inheritance. From myself. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover application fees, camp programs, maybe a first semester for students who had nothing else. For once, I could choose where sacrifice went. The rest of the check went into a new account, this one locked down with only my name. The banker who helped me set it up smiled politely, unaware that his mundane keystrokes marked a seismic shift in my life. Then came the part I had been dreading, house hunting. Rachel's Instagram was still a highlight reel of polished countertops and rooftop views. I refused to play that game. I didn't need perfection. I needed freedom. The realtor, Janet, drove me through neighborhoods with a practiced smile. She showed me sleek condos with stainless appliances, manicured townhouses with HOA fees that rivaled rent. I shook my head at each one. Finally, she pulled up to a cottage on Maple Street. It's modest, she warned, almost apologetic. The siding was weathered, paint peeling in places. The porch sagged slightly. Inside, hardwood floors bore the scuffs of decades. The kitchen counters were outdated, and the second bedroom was barely large enough for a bed. But sunlight poured through east-facing windows, drenching the space in morning light. And in the backyard, an ancient oak tree stretched its arms toward the sky, roots deep and defiant. It's quiet, Janet said hesitantly. Some people prefer more activity. I walked slowly through the rooms. The echo of my footsteps didn't feel lonely. It felt like possibility. I imagined bookshelves against the walls, a sofa where laughter would spill, a dining table for friends who chose me, not out of obligation, but affection. This one, I said softly. Janet blinked. Really? You're sure? Yes. My voice didn't waver. A week later, I stood on the porch holding the keys. The cottage wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, entirely mine. The first night, I sat cross-legged on the floor of the empty living room, a pizza box open beside me. No parents' voices, no Rachel's laughter, no portraits arranged to prove worth. Just silence and the creak of my own home adjusting to me. I should have felt euphoric, but tears slipped down my cheeks instead. This victory felt lonely. My family wasn't here. There would be no champagne toast, no framed photo of me holding the keys, no congratulatory dinner. Still, I whispered to the bare walls, we'll make this a home. The following weekend, Sarah arrived with paint samples and a toolbox. You're not doing this alone, she declared. Aunt Meredith followed a day later, arms full of gardening gloves and potted flowers. We worked in tandem, Sarah sanding cabinets, Meredith digging soil, me learning to swing a hammer without fear. Slowly, the cottage transformed. Window boxes sprouted geraniums, the oak tree became the centerpiece of a backyard garden, and laughter echoed through rooms that once only knew dust. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of rose and gold, we gathered in the backyard with paper plates of takeout and plastic cups of wine. "To new beginnings," Sarah toasted. "To reclaiming what was ours," Aunt Meredith added, eyes twinkling. We clinked cups, and for the first time in months, I felt warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with wine. After dinner, Meredith lingered as Sarah left. She reached into her tote and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. "I've held on to this for years," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure when, or if, you'd be ready." I frowned. "What is it?" "Your grandfather's codicil. A copy, at least. It mentions provisions that, well, your father never honored." The weight of it pressed against my palm like a secret long buried. "Why give it to me now?" "Because you've proven you won't be silenced, and because you'll need it." Her gaze held mine. "This isn't just about money, Theresa. It never was." When she left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the envelope staring back like a dare. My fingers itched to tear it open, but exhaustion held me still. Some truths could wait one more night. Upstairs, in my bare bedroom, I curled beneath borrowed blankets. Outside, the oak tree rustled, a sentinel in the dark. For the first time, I slept without fear of what tomorrow would demand of me. But I dreamed of drawers and boxes locked tight, of papers my father swore should stay shut. 1 year later, the garden was alive. The cottage that once felt hollow now thrummed with color, window boxes bursting with geraniums, a stone path lined with purple coneflowers, sunlight painting golden patches across the worn hardwood inside. Every plant I'd pressed into soil had taken root, stubborn and resilient, like me. I knelt in the dirt beside the oak, pulling weeds, when a shadow fell across the garden gate. "Theresa?" I looked up, heart stuttering. My mother stood there, hands clasped around her purse, pearl earrings gleaming against her pale face. She looked smaller, somehow. Less like the woman who once dictated appearances, and more like someone who had been shrinking under silence. "Your flowers are beautiful," she said softly. I brushed soil from my gloves and rose slowly. "Thank you." Behind me, Aunt Meredith set down a trowel. She wiped her brow, then caught the look on my face. "I'll check on the tarts," she murmured, squeezing my shoulder before disappearing inside. For a long moment, my mother and I just stood there, the oak leaves whispering above us. "I didn't bring anything," she said nervously. "I should have." "It's all right," I answered, though my chest tightened. She stepped cautiously into the garden, as though entering sacred ground. "I've been thinking about what happened, about what we did." Her voice wavered. "I told myself we were being practical, that Rachel needed help, that you would be fine. But I see now, I didn't see you." Her words trembled in the air, inadequate but monumental. "I'm glad you see it now," I said simply. Tears pricked her eyes. "Your father still doesn't understand. He says you abandoned the family." "I didn't abandon anyone," I replied, meeting her gaze. "I just stopped abandoning myself." She flinched at the truth, but didn't argue. For once, she let silence hold. "Would you like some tea?" I offered. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening. She nodded, a fragile smile ghosting her lips. Later, after she'd gone, Aunt Meredith reappeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands. "How was that?" "Hard," I admitted, "but different." She studied me for a moment, then reached into her tote. "Different means you're ready." She handed me the envelope she'd given months ago, its edges yellowed, the paper brittle. "Your grandfather's codicil," she reminded. I hesitated, then slid a finger under the seal. Inside was a copy of his will's amendment, written in neat, deliberate script. My name leapt off the page. A provision of $5,000 for Theresa Marlowe's first home, to be safeguarded in trust until such time as she makes her own start. Below that, an itemized list of heirlooms designated for Aunt Meredith, jewelry, keepsakes, even a small insurance bond. None of it had ever reached us. I felt the floor tilt under me. "He meant for me to have this." "Yes," Meredith said, "and your father intercepted it. He told me it had to stay in the main line, that you'd be provided for eventually, but eventually became never." The words pressed into me like stones. Grandpa hadn't overlooked me. He had remembered. Carefully, specifically, and still I'd been erased. "Why didn't you fight him?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. She sighed. "I was tired, beaten down by years of battles I never won, and I didn't want to lose what little connection I still had." I folded the codicil with trembling hands. I won't let it happen again. Meredith's eyes glistened with pride. That's why I gave it to you, because you won't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the codicil spread out beneath the warm glow of a single lamp. My grandfather's handwriting felt like a ghost reaching across time, urging me to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Mom's words echoed, "You don't know what your father had to do after Grandpa died." What had he hidden? What drawers had he locked? Meredith's voice haunted me too. This isn't just about money. It never was. I knew then that the settlement wasn't the end. It was only the surface, smoothed over by legal signatures. Beneath it lay layers of buried choices, each one shaping who we were allowed to become. And somewhere in my parents' house, in drawers my father swore should stay shut, I suspected the rest of the truth waited. The hallway of my parents' house smelled the same as always, lemon cleaner and faint cigarette smoke that clung to old wood. But that evening, everything felt sharper, more brittle. Aunt Meredith walked at my side, her steps steady but resolute. She had insisted on coming with me. "They won't stonewall if I'm there," she'd said. Dad was waiting in the living room, his frame rigid in his armchair like a sentry guarding territory. Mom perched on the sofa, twisting her pearl bracelet until it clicked like teeth. Rachel was absent, though her absence felt deliberate. She'd never liked facing messes head-on. "Theresa," Dad began, voice controlled but tight. "This has gone far enough." "No," I said, gripping the envelope in my hand. "It hasn't even begun." I laid the codicil on the coffee table. His eyes flicked to it, then away, like a man spotting a weapon. "This was Grandpa's," I said. "It names me. It names Meredith. Provisions we never saw." Dad's jaw tightened. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Meredith cut in, her voice sharp. "You intercepted it, just like you intercepted Grandma's jewelry, just like you convinced me to let it go for the good of the family." A flush rose in Dad's cheeks. "It wasn't like that." "Then where is it?" I pressed. "Where's the rest?" His silence was louder than any denial. "Robert," Mom whispered, eyes darting between us. Maybe it's time." His glare silenced her, but the damage was done. My pulse raced. Time for what? Meredith's gaze didn't waver. "The box, Robert. The one you swore should stay shut." For the first time in my life, my father looked cornered. His authority wavered, just slightly, and I recognized it for what it was. Fear. After a long, brittle pause, he rose. Without a word, he strode down the hall. We followed, our footsteps muffled on the old runner rug. He stopped at the hall closet, reached into the shadows, and pulled out a battered blue metal box. It was smaller than I'd expected, heavy enough that his hands trembled slightly as he set it on the dining table. "I won't open it," he muttered. "Then I will." My hands were steadier than I felt as I flipped the latch. The lid creaked open, revealing neat stacks of documents, envelopes yellowed with age, and velvet pouches that clinked softly. The scent of dust and old ink rose like a ghost. At the very top lay an envelope in my grandfather's handwriting. "Correct this if I am gone." I unfolded the letter, my breath shallow. Grandpa's words were blunt. "I leave specific assets to Meredith and Theresa. Do not alter this. Family is not licensed to redistribute. Integrity above all." My throat closed. He had trusted my father to honor his words, and Dad had chosen silence instead. Beneath the letter were appraisals of Grandma's jewelry, insurance slips, and deposit records that traced decades of assets. Some had been crossed out, transferred elsewhere, lines of ink marking where promises had been redirected. Meredith picked up a pouch, opened it, and gasped. The sapphire brooch Grandma had promised her. Tears filled her eyes as she clutched it. "I thought it was lost." My chest tightened. "He told you it stayed in the family line." Her gaze hardened. Apparently family line meant Rachel. I turned to Dad. "You stole from both of us." He finally spoke, voice low, defensive. "I was protecting order. If everyone got their slice, there'd be nothing left. Families need strength, not scraps." "Strength built on theft isn't strength," I shot back. Mom's hands shook as she reached for the papers. "Robert, it's all here. You told me—" She stopped, pressing the tissue to her lips. "Don't," he warned, his voice rising. "Don't you dare turn on me." But for the first time, she didn't shrink. She looked at me, then at Meredith, and whispered, "I should have asked questions years ago." I sifted deeper into the box. Tucked at the bottom was another sealed envelope, crisp, newer than the others. My name wasn't on it. Rachel's was. My stomach twisted as I held it up. What's this? Dad lunged forward, but Meredith blocked him. No more secrets, Robert. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a note in Grandma's looping script. Rachel, you have plenty. Use it to shield your sister, not strip from her. Do not forget fairness. One day you may be tested. Silence fell like a shroud. Rachel had known, maybe not the details, but enough. Enough to know the money wasn't hers to take without cost. I pressed the note flat against the table. My voice came out colder than I intended. You all chose to ignore her words. To ignore him. To ignore me. Dad slammed the lid shut, the sound reverberating like a gunshot. Enough. You've dug up what you wanted, but this family survives because of me. Without me, you'd all be nothing. No, Meredith said firmly, placing the brooch against her chest. Without us, you've been nothing but a thief. Mom's sob broke the silence. She whispered to me, Theresa, what will you do with this? I looked at the blue box, at decades of silence and rerouted promises. My grandfather's words echoed, correct this if I am gone. The weight of that command pressed heavy in my chest. I'll decide, I said quietly, but this ends with me. Dad's glare followed me as I carried the documents out of the house, the blue box lighter in my hands than the burden it carried in truth. On the porch, Meredith exhaled shakily. You've got the proof now. The choice is yours. I nodded, but inside a storm brewed, because proof was power, and power demanded action. 2 days after the blue box, the documents lay fanned across Thomas Reeves's conference table like a small city seen from above, streets of ink, neighborhoods of signatures, monuments of intent. Thomas adjusted his rimless glasses and tapped the center stack. We can pursue criminal charges, he said evenly. Fraud, conversion, potential estate violations. Or we can structure a restorative agreement with teeth, restitution, transfer of designated items, acknowledgments, and a no-contact clause until terms are fulfilled. Your call. The word criminal lodged in my throat. I saw my father's rigid silhouette, my mother's shaking hands, the way fear had trained them to confuse control with love. Justice mattered. So did what came after. Restorative, I said at last, but enforceable. No more invisible rules. No more reworded promises. Thomas's mouth twitched. Approval, not a smile. Then we'll draft conditions they can't wiggle around. By afternoon, he'd built the scaffolding. Exhibit A, copy of the codicil naming a cash reserve for my first home. Exhibit B, appraisals and insurance slips for Grandma's heirlooms. Exhibit C, Grandpa's letter, correct this if I am gone. Exhibit D, the note to Rachel. Use your plenty to shield, not strip. The agreement demanded 1. Immediate return of designated heirlooms to Aunt Meredith. 2. Transfer of the codicil's cash reserve equivalency to reduce my mortgage principal. 3. A signed written acknowledgement of the misappropriation and a binding commitment to make no further claim on my assets. 4. A formal apology, concise, explicit. 5. A no-contact clause for 90 days, except through counsel. 6. My agreement not to press criminal charges contingent on full compliance within 10 business days. Thomas slid the draft toward me. One more element, he said, eyes keen. They've used family reputation as a cudgel. We'll invert it. If they breach, we reserve the right to publish the acknowledgement along with exhibits. Sunlight clause. The breath I didn't know I'd been holding slipped out. Do it. We met in the same room where they'd signed the first settlement. This time Dad didn't posture. He arrived armored in silence. Mom's pearls were gone. She wore small gold studs as if to apologize for their glint. Thomas reviewed the agreement clause by clause, voice steady as a metronome. Exhibit A, he said, tapping the codicil. A reserve your father diverted. The mortgage reduction wire will post to Ms. Marlowe's lender upon execution. Dad's jaw worked. How much? 5,000 plus inflation-adjusted equivalency, Thomas replied. 7,400 today. He moved to Exhibit B, and Aunt Meredith lifted the velvet pouch, the sapphire brooch catching light like trapped sea. Her fingers trembled. It was never lost, she said softly to no one and everyone, only rerouted. Mom stared at the table. Robert. He flinched at his name, as if titles had shielded him until now. When Thomas read Grandpa's line, "Family is not licensed to redistribute," the room shifted. I saw the man my father once might have been, a son taught scarcity like catechism. But I also saw the man who had chosen quiet theft and called it stewardship. "And Exhibit D," Thomas finished, placing Grandma's note to Rachel in the center as if it were a compass. The inked instruction, shield, not strip, seemed to throw its own small light. A chair scraped behind me. For a heartbeat, I thought it was Rachel. She'd come late, chin lifted, eyes rimmed red like she'd slept in mascara. She stood without her usual phone armor. "I need to say something," she began, voice thin. "I knew about one withdrawal, the tuition." She swallowed. "I told myself Dad would make it even later, that it was temporary. When the house came, I didn't ask where it really came from. I didn't want to know." My lungs ached. "You didn't only not want to know," I said quietly. "You wanted it more." Her eyes flicked to the note with her name. Shame loosened her posture. "I can't take it back, but I won't take another cent that isn't mine." She faced Thomas. "Add me to the acknowledgement. I'm not a child." Dad's head snapped toward her, betrayed that the acolyte had stepped off the dais. He reached for the pen, rage trembling down his arm, and signed first. His name looked like it had been dragged across gravel. Mom signed next, a palm pressed flat to the paper as if to steady the past. Rachel lifted the pen last. Meet my eyes. Wire receipts printed. The mortgage servicer confirmed the principal reduction. A courier would deliver the heirlooms to Aunt Meredith's home by evening. Thomas gathered the copies. "Compliance complete," he said. "As of this moment, the restorative agreement is in force. Ms. Marlowe, shall we countersign?" I nodded, and my signature landed lightly, like something setting down after a long flight. Outside, the air tasted newly washed. On the sidewalk, Rachel hesitated. "Can we talk?" she asked, words small as beads. "Not yet," I said, not unkindly. 90 days. I had learned the shape of safety. Sometimes it looked like a boundary. That night, the courier knocked as promised. Aunt Meredith opened the velvet pouches at my kitchen table, laying jewels like constellations. She traced the brooch, then closed her hand around it, relief slipping into her features like warmth. "I thought I lost myself when I lost these," she admitted. "Turns out I just needed proof to find my voice again." We ate simple food on mismatched plates. Sarah arrived with a bottle and the news that my mortgage portal reflected the new balance. We toasted with water and wine, and the lemon tart Aunt had sworn wasn't store-bought. It was. "To building what we keep," Sarah said. "And returning what was never ours," Meredith added. Later, I stepped out to the porch. The oak lifted dark limbs against a sky glossy with stars. The cottage's windows threw small squares of light onto the soil we'd turned by hand. My phone buzzed. A new message. From Mom. "Thank you for leaving space I didn't earn. I'm going to try to become someone who could." I watched the words for a long time. I didn't reply. Not yet. Apologies were seeds. I had learned to wait and see what would grow. Over the next weeks, the air in my life changed. At school, a parent handed me a card with a donation receipt to the scholarship fund for the teacher who taught my son the word integrity, she'd written. The cottage filled slowly with what I chose: a thrifted oak table, a woven throw, a secondhand lamp that made evenings viscous and soft. On Saturdays, Meredith and I walked the neighborhood, two women unlearning what they'd been told they owed. On a quiet Sunday, I stood in the backyard with pruning shears and thought about the calculus of legacy. What to keep? My grandfather's insistence on fairness, the stubbornness that made me save, the tenderness that made me teach. What to return? A storyline where my worth was measured in silence, the altar of reputation, the idea that love could be enforced through ledger entries. I took the signed acknowledgement from its folder and slid it into a fireproof box of my own. Not trophies, not threats, just receipts of a truth reclaimed. That evening, a few friends gathered for dinner. Sarah brought rosemary bread. Jack from school set down a pie with a shrug. It's ugly, but it's honest. Meredith lit candles that smelled faintly of rain. We passed bowls around a table that was still dinged at the edges and perfect to me. A place at the end remained open. I didn't set it on purpose, I just didn't fill it. When the dishes were stacked and laughter thinned to a comfortable hush, I stepped onto the porch swing with my journal. The breeze moved through the oak like a low hymn. I wrote, "The most valuable thing I reclaimed wasn't the money. It was authority over my time, my name, and what I will allow in my life. My family may never look like I imagined, but I'm building one anyway, patiently, willingly, and in the light. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Rachel this time, just 3 words. I'm ready now. I didn't know what ready meant to her, repentance, repair, or merely relief. But the door I'd left ajar stayed ajar. Readiness would be measured not by promises, but by practice. Inside, someone laughed at something on the radio. The porch smelled faintly of cut lemon and fresh soil. I closed the journal and looked up. Fireflies stitched brief futures over the garden. The oak rustled once, a benediction. I let the quiet hold.